Okay, so it's such a pleasure to welcome you all to our second community town hall. My name is David Sun Kong. I am the founder of the Bio Summit and I direct the Community Biotechnology Initiative at the Media Lab at MIT. And it's such a thrill to be here with you all. This is, again, for those of you that have been a part of the Bio Summit family, an experiment that we're conducting in part as a part of the lead up into the actual BioSummit 4.0, which will be happening in October. And so it's such a thrill to be here with you all. And we've got a really, really fantastic group of panelists and a fantastic leader and moderator in Thelma, who has been really helping to lead and make all of this happen. And just shout outs to all of the organizers from the BioSummit team for pulling this together. So we really appreciate you all being here. And again, we really look forward to you engaging with us and participating with us, and also in a way, participating in this experiment with us on a new format and trying to engage with our community and share hopefully some really great content that's relevant for all of us. So with that, I will turn it over to our fearless moderator and host for today. So can everybody give a round of applause for Thelma, who is holding it down for us and has been doing such an awesome job organizing. So Thelma, go for it.
Hello everyone, this is Thelma, and this is the very, very long title of this panel. Science Communication and the Global Community Bio Movement, and we will be sharing knowledge and addressing misinformation during a global pandemic. So we have 4 amazing panelists. They are experts in their field, and we will be learning a lot from them and from all the participants in this panel. So as David said, you can write all your comments, all your doubts in the chat as they appear in your head, and we will be discussing that later. So I will introduce our panelists, and then they will have a couple of minutes to introduce themselves. So our first panelist, Emily Mullen, she is from Medium, and she is here to explain us what she does and how that relates to science communication. The second one, Hanu, who works at LX Nano. Actually, he's the director. And he will talk us about that in a couple of minutes. Then Perrine, she is really, really young, and we really appreciate her vision in all the themes and young atmosphere. And over David, who works at the MIT and leader of all this bio crazy community. So they will have now a couple of minutes to tell us who they are, what do they do, how does that relate to science communication, and later we will talk about all this pandemic and all this crazy new world we have now. So it's your time. Do you want to go in that order? Maybe Emily, Hanu, Perrine, and David, please. So welcome everyone.
Hi, my name is Emily Mullen. I'm a staff writer at 10. We're a tech and science publication at Medium, and I cover biotechnology. I've written extensively about CRISPR, gene therapy. I've written a little bit about the DIY biology field. I've covered genetic privacy in the context of 23andMe, genetic tests, things like that. And of course, I've recently been focused on COVID. Medium has launched a coronavirus blog. It's coronavirus.medium.com for anyone who's interested. So I've been contributing to our blog over the past couple months. And I'm also an adjunct instructor in the Masters in Science Writing program at Johns Hopkins. And at the end of June, I actually just finished teaching up a week-long residency course on writing about the pandemic. And we focused a lot of our time talking about misinformation and disinformation and how to combat it, how to avoid spreading it. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannu Rajaniemi, and as Thelma mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of a startup called Helix Nano. And before the pandemic, we were using synthetic biology tools to develop cancer therapeutics and cancer vaccines, but now actually jumped headfirst into developing a COVID-19 vaccine, which we are making good progress on. And in non-pandemic times, even though I'm not a science communicator as such, I've written a few science fiction novels and quite a few science fiction stories and my next forthcoming book actually if we get out of all of this, will actually be a novel about the future of community bio.
Awesome. Hey guys, my name is Perrine, rhymes with marine, like marine bio. I am a rising high school junior, as well as the current director of Science in Us, and we are a youth-based science communication organization based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And basically, we're all about spreading the idea of science communication to curious high school students. And I'm super excited to be speaking with all of you guys today.
And again, my name is David Kong, and it's just such an honor and privilege to be here with you all. I direct the Community Biotechnology Initiative at the Media Lab at MIT, and I'm also the founder of the BioSummit, and really care very deeply about science communication, especially in the context of COVID-19 and the pandemic. I think as we've seen play out over the past number of months, there's just a huge amount of misinformation and a lot of conflicting narratives about the science that is connected to the pandemic. And I know for myself, at the start of this whole thing, I was very optimistic that, science was going to save the day and that the larger public would feel like have a certain sort of perspective around science that it was really a profoundly positive thing and so on. And I think as the pandemic, particularly in the United States, has unfolded, in some ways, I felt the opposite of that. I felt really, really concerned. And so I think, having an event like this and being able to speak and talk with you all that are a part of our larger community about this as well, I think is really critical, because I do think that for grassroots folks working in the sciences or doing community bio, DIY bio, et cetera, one of the most important roles we all collectively can play is around science communication. So I look forward to the conversation with our incredible panelists, but also with everybody in the community. And just to say too, you should definitely introduce yourselves as well in the chat for those of you that are there. Feel free to introduce yourselves and say hello. It's always nice to know, to see who's here. So yay, thanks, and Thelma, back to you.
Yay. Well, it's awesome. Yeah, please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, what you do. And as you see, we have a wide variety of people here from all the massive platform of Medium to technical issues, to young people, to crazy interdisciplinary people. So we're gonna get really started now. The first question, the first issue is how a community lab or an initiative which seems to be small, maybe very, very local, can help to communicate in this pandemic time. For example, what are the key connections with the people to raise awareness of what is happening in this wild world? And more specifically, what information do you think is critical to share in your media for your community? And how do you think it's more useful to do it? For example, I don't know, infographics, maybe social media posts, webinars, videos. At the beginning, maybe we had a lot of webinars, but now we are all like, oh my God, I can't go to more webinars in the day. So how do you think this evolves? How do you think we can share knowledge in this way? For example, maybe Hanu, in a technical way, how can you approach how a vaccine works and how a treatment works? What do you think about that? And then maybe Perrine, why is young people interested in this? What can we do in this context? Please let us know.
Okay, I'm happy to start. Thank you, Thelma. So, yeah, I guess there is essentially a challenge in just communicating what vaccines are and what they do. And of course, we live in an era where there is quite a lot of resistance and doubt about vaccines. And I think actually a particularly challenging aspect of this with the current pandemic is how do we balance between communicating the promise of vaccines and also the risks of vaccines. Yeah. So the problem with the current pandemic is that we have a lot of information coming in about the virus every day. We are starting to understand that it's quite a complex pathogen. It does all kinds of clever things to the immune system. So it's not a given that we will rapidly have effective vaccines. In a way, what we're doing right now is applying old vaccine technologies just faster, or using new platforms to develop old school vaccines faster, but it may take more than that. And just very recently, Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins highlighted that this may not be like in the measles vaccine, that is going to be one shot and effective. It might not be. I mean, it might end up being more like a seasonal flu vaccine with waning immunity or lost efficacy against new strains that we'll have to re-administer every year. And actually, there is some discussion in the scientific community on risks beyond that actually one potential huge risk with coronavirus vaccines in the past has been something called antibody-dependent enhancement, where you can actually make the disease worse through an incorrectly designed vaccine. And there's a very cautionary example of this recently in the Philippines, where Sanofi deployed a dengue vaccine, vaccinated 800,000 people. And in a significant portion of those people, the vaccine made the disease worse. It gave them a severe disease when they would have otherwise had a mild disease. And as a result, all vaccinations in the Philippines dropped by half, not just dengue vaccines, because people actually lost the trust in the whole approach. So I think this is really delicate. I mean, on one hand, we need to make people comfortable with the idea of vaccines and make sure that they take them. At the same time, we need to set expectations that this may not be an easy thing. Like the first vaccine might not be super effective. We might even see harmful side effects related to vaccines. So this is something that I do worry about quite a lot, and I don't actually have necessarily a good proposed solution to that. The current authorities don't seem to have a very good track record of transparent communication of actions we should take and risks. So I think there's definitely a need to curate high quality information on this in a way that is easily understandable. But I'd love to hear the other panelists on thoughts on how we can do this better, especially with vaccines, given the complexity of the situation.
Okay, so as I was saying, Perrine, what do you think young people is interested in? It's critical for them to know.
Yeah, so I feel like nowadays, especially with the whole pandemic happening, many of today's pressing issues involve science. And this is not only COVID-19, but also climate change, CRISPR. And I see a lot of my peers going to climate rallies. Many of them are creating like coronavirus like groups like to raise awareness. But if we aren't truly aware of the science, we can't really take the steps towards solving the actual problem. So I feel like science communication is very important, especially for the younger audiences, because it's important for everyone to be aware of what's happening in our world. And people may see what's on the news, but they need to get a closer sense of the science behind it to make an actual impact. And so, like nowadays, many high schoolers are aware of the science, but aren't really sure where to take the data and how to like translate it, how to make it like decipherable for them. So I feel like there needs to be adequate science communication between the public and scientists to kind of make sure that the steps that are taken can be accessed by everyone.
Awesome. And for example, Emily, how do you think it's better to do it? I mean, maybe people watch TV, like all elder people watch TV, and the young people social media, and the younger just TikTok. So we have to really get into all these people in science communication somehow. So how do you think we can reach different kind of population?
As someone who is too old to be on TikTok, I don't know if I can speak to that platform. But I will speak to Medium, which is an interesting company because we're both a platform, and Medium has its own in-house publications that are run by journalists, and I'm on the staff of one of those publications, 10, which is our tech and science publication. And we're dealing with misinformation too, like Twitter and Facebook are, because you know, anybody can create a Medium account and post something on Medium. What we have done with our posts is we do have like a disclaimer at the top of any content that is not in one of our in-house publications that says, you know, not anybody can post on Medium, not every post has been fact-checked, and it does redirect people to our coronavirus blog. So any coronavirus content that is kind of like taking off on the Medium platform that is member social media platforms and platforms like Medium need to be more aware of the misinformation and need to take steps to be actively sort of policing what's on the website, you know, what's on their platforms. I want to get back to what Hanu was talking about with, you know, communicating effectively around vaccines and treatments, because this is something I deal with as a science journalist every day, is sort of this balance between the hype and the hope of science. And, you know, as somebody who, I have a journalism background, I have a master's in science writing. I'm not a scientist myself, but you know, I want to root for the scientists, but you also have to, you know, I also am, when I go to write a story, I'm evaluating, okay, how realistic is this? And when I write a story, I'm always thinking about what are the caveats? What do we know about this technology? What do we know about this virus? What don't we know? So for instance, with vaccines, you know, I think there's a lot of optimism right now that we're going to get a vaccine by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. But in reality, the timeline for vaccines is so long. And so what I try to do when I'm writing is I always, you know, put things in context. I always make sure to add context about the technologies I'm writing about, the people I'm writing about, the companies I'm writing about. For instance, Moderna and a couple of other companies pursuing RNA vaccines and DNA vaccines. These vaccines are unproven technology. We don't have licensed vaccines yet that rely on this technology. That really needs to be communicated. You know, Moderna is being kind of called a front runner right now in the vaccine race, but we need to make the public aware that the vaccine that they're working on relies on unproven technology. Novavax is another one. There was the announcement yesterday that they just won like over $1 billion from the US government. And this is a company that's never brought a product to market before. So I think when we're communicating science and we're communicating the hope of new vaccines and treatments, we always need to temper that with context and sort of the appropriate lens.
Yeah, totally. And for example, David, you said that at the beginning you were very optimistic. Now you don't know what to think about society. So what do you think are the unique opportunities or the way this pandemic somehow helped to create community, the positive aspects of science communication during this time that we're all in our houses?
Yeah, so I think that there's just a lot of opportunities. And, you know, I think part of what's happened, particularly in the United States, where there are so many conflicting narratives that are occurring and there is no kind of unified communication strategy in a way. You know, I think if you look at a number of the countries that have handled the pandemic well, I think one of the common features is that they've had a very consistent communicator that has been given a platform and either every day or at some very regular frequency is communicating to the public that there's alignment with the public health community, with government officials and so on. So if you look at countries like, you know, South Korea, Taiwan, parts of the world, you know, Greece, even other countries, there's a lot of alignment and clear communication. And so I think in the United States, what we've seen is when there is so much conflicting narrative that's occurring, you have a situation now where there's a lot of confusion. And in a way, the grassroots communication becomes more important because now you need some larger way to kind of get certain types of messages out to communities. And so the question is, how do you do that? earlier on for me at the end of February and at the beginning of March, I don't know if anybody's seen that movie, Train to Busan. It's this like Korean zombie movie. Um, I felt like one of the people at the beginning. So at the beginning of the movie, there are a couple of people that like feel like know the zombie apocalypse is coming, but like everybody thinks they're crazy. They're like, oh, who's that crazy guy talking about the zombies are coming, you know? And I personally felt like that, you know, at the end of February, at the beginning of March, in part because of relationships with the technical community. You know, I think there are certain folks that had a very strong feeling that this was going to get really bad. And so for myself, just as an individual, I just started hopping on platforms that I had access to and could use. So I started doing Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives, just kind of speaking to the universe, being like, hey, if anybody's listening, I think this is going to get really bad and everybody should start really taking this seriously, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember even the first time I did a Facebook Live, it was like 2 a.m. I just like randomly did it because I couldn't sleep. I was just like got on. I was like, hey, I don't know if anybody's listening, and it ended up, it didn't go viral, but it got shared like quite a bit beyond my like friend group. And I started getting messages on like the Facebook Live that people were adding me, and they're like, hey, who's this guy talking? Like you know, because somebody would share it to other people and they didn't know who I was. And then I realized, oh, if I need to talk about it, I actually need to introduce myself and like say who I am at the beginning of these things and like maybe mention some of my credentials and why I might be a useful person to listen to. And so just over time, like just doing a lot of these experiments, I started realizing, okay, there's actually some pretty good ways to try to get this out there. And I found personally that particular format, doing lives and even sessions like this, it's a way to get out more granular information. And there's also a lot more kind of communication that happens when you can actually listen to and see somebody talk, which is different than I think in writing or a tweet or whatever. There's something also about, again, I think what Hanu was getting at, which is trust, which I think is one of the most massive elements of this whole pandemic is trust. Is there trust between the public and the public health professionals and science communicators, et cetera, communicators? And so you need to think of very creative ways to build that trust. And so, you know, one thing that I think, you know, for me at MIT, what we started doing, we identified pretty early on, you know, we had this larger meeting where we were asking like, hey, like what are our top priorities? And of course there's technical elements, diagnostics, therapies, vaccines, et cetera. But actually number one on my list was science communication. Because at that time in early March too, it was like in the US, it was, you had major political parties and, you know, massive voices saying, oh, it's just the flu. Like, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Yeah. So it's like, you have to be able to communicate the risk to people. And so we got to work on this larger platform, which we called Beat the Virus, which was a campaign that in brief was about trying to figure out, one, what is actually kind of scientific facts that we know of? And that by itself is incredibly challenging, which I think Hanu and maybe Emily can talk about, I've spoken a little bit about, is what is truth, right? Just kind of even amongst the scientific community, figuring that out before even communicating to the public. How do you understand what that is? How do you verify that, et cetera? But if you do have some baseline, then could you actually, in the case of Beat the Virus, use influencer networks where you have a very specific message you want to communicate, which early on were things like wash your hands, don't touch your face, stay physically distant from people, right? Like early on, again, people had no idea what to do. So we had a bunch of very simple core messages, and then working using this platform, started pairing with different influencers to try to get them to message to their people what to do and what to say. And then along the way, you know, over the past bunch of months for me, I've been working on, you know, continuing to do these kind of lives, but with influencers, for example, to like talk with them and have a conversation with them on their platform to try to communicate some of these facts. So those are just a couple of the areas. And, you know, again, we can talk more about it, but yeah, it's just some initial thoughts.
Awesome. And now that we have talked about how we changed our mindset from last year to this year, what do you think are the most like special challenges that we are facing? For example, Emily, you say you have disclaimers and say like, okay, if you read this, this is maybe not from a very specialist person, but what do you think we should do to help all the people with a license to push them up? For example, give them a special place in the TV, or do you think there is like more pages, more than the World Health Organization, that maybe it's not so understandable for people? What do you think it would work for population to know the science at it is to understand them? For example, maybe YouTube influencers. How do you think we can like give knowledge to people in this pandemic that they can really feel they understand?
One thing we've been doing with the Medium coronavirus blog, that is sort of like our we post daily updates, and we also bring in voices from elsewhere on Medium. So we have been, our blog editor has been pulling in scientists and researchers who are blogging on Medium, and will feature their posts on Medium. So for instance, we feature Andy Slavitt a lot, who you might remember from the Obama administration. He was the head of CMS there, and he writes for Medium all the time. So that's a way that we have been kind of, you know, a lot of people might not realize that Medium does publish journalism. They might just think of it as a platform that anyone can go to publish on, but through like our blog, we have been really trying to bring this awareness that like we do have journalists on staff who are vetting information, but we're also bringing in voices, researchers, and experts who are posting across Medium. And we've been doing these shorter posts on the Medium blog that have been really popular with readers based on information that they need to know in their daily lives. So I'm thinking of, we had a really popular post around Mother's Day, and the question was just, you know, we've been doing these really short Q&As with experts. And the question around Mother's Day was, is it safe to send your mother flowers for Mother's Day? And it seems like a really simplistic question, but it was information, I think, that people were, it's the kind of information that people are craving for in their everyday lives to make decisions based on, you know, what their risk is in terms of doing certain activities and interacting with other people. And so this post was only a couple of paragraphs long. I think it was like a 2 or 3 minute read on Medium, but it was really popular because it was pegged to, you know, it was pegged to Mother's Day. It was information about, you know, steps you might want to take to reduce your risk of transmission. And the shorter Q&A type format with experts we found that on the blog, it works really well. And on 10, our tech and science publication, we like stories that tend to have like a longer shelf life, I would say. And as a more future focused publication, readers there really like stories that are future looking and kind of about how the pandemic and COVID is shaping society and kind of what we can expect in the future. And so I think like knowing who your audience is and who you're trying to reach is key in kind of tailoring your message. So our blog readers might be slightly different from like our the average 10 reader, for instance.
Yeah, that's true. Depends a lot on who listens to it. And for example, coming back to what Hanu said before, that there are many treatments, many vaccines being developed. For example, what happens when at the beginning of this month, maybe they were talking about this treatment, let's say the hydroxychloroquine case, that they start to say, yeah, this is good, we can go in this way. And a couple of weeks later, they say like, maybe it's not that effective. Maybe we can look for other treatments. Hanu, how do you think we can communicate in the way of letting people know that science is changing, it's evolving, and we are rapidly recognizing that maybe that treatment is not perfect and we can try another? How can we say to people that it's safe to understand that one treatment is working now, but is not going to be the perfect treatment for all the population? How do you think we can share this like kind of disclaimer of saying science is evolving?
Yeah, I think one of the core aspects of science communication I generally see missing is communicating the fact that science is solving a puzzle, that it's not done, that this is that it's maybe there's metaphors we could use, like a detective story or this gradual process of uncovering, putting together clues and forming theories and then testing them. And of course, the challenge here is that we're trying to do it very fast to develop effective treatments and vaccines. But we really also need to figure out the puzzle. And we are still right in the middle of it. So we essentially, like, even though everybody wants certainty, everybody wants answers, we are still only operating with essentially pieces of this puzzle that we haven't solved yet. So that's one challenge for sure. And I think I'm not sure exactly how to best communicate that aspect. The other thing I've been thinking about a lot is kind of the opposite of the problem, which so David actually shared some of his encounters with wild conspiracy theories on different platforms, which I had no idea about, and then dug into a little bit and was shocked to realize that in places like Belgium, kind of a fairly I would say science-friendly country as a whole, people are destroying 5G base stations because they think 5G radio waves might be making you your immune system more vulnerable to COVID, or actually even spread the virus, or it's all a cover up to the entire pandemic is a smokescreen to prevent us from finding out that it's actually 5G causing all these problems. So I think one thing to think about as we develop science communication strategies is really, why do people believe these stories? And one insight that I found quite interesting was that maybe it's not that these things are obviously untrue, but maybe on some level they are true. Like they are true on the level of myth, or in the same way that we find something appealing about fictional stories, about mythology. That captures something about our experience of reality. And I think right now, many people feel that that reality is controlled by some shadowy group of people that operate behind the scenes, and who actually have a hidden agenda. And that is true, right? I mean, that is actually true. That is the case in the United States on some level. And then they, of course, fabricate this story around it and connect dots that shouldn't be connected. But I guess my question is, besides effectively communicating the uncertain nature and this puzzle-solving aspect of science, how can we also do it in a way that feels true to people's experience, so that whatever message we create resonates in the same way as stories about 5G conspiracies? Anyway, that may be a separate issue, but that is something that I do see as a big, perhaps a challenge, but also an opportunity.
Okay, awesome. Interesting point of view. I certainly didn't think there was this other reality that may be true for some people. So, for example, in a more global perspective, David, what do you think? How does this lack of certainty affects people to empower them to communicate? Maybe if, for example, I'm a chemist, I know some things about pharmacology, but I don't really feel like really empowered to share what they are doing in Denmark or Finland, because maybe there's a lack of context. How do you think, what recommendations would you think to empower people to say, okay, I will share this, but maybe this could change, just take it as like the thing that is happening in other part of the world that may be useful or not? How can you develop this empowering feeling to the community?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, and I was reflecting a lot too about the role that community labs can play and community bio and kind of these grassroots science networks, because I think that when you need communication at scale, one great way to do it could be through a network like ours, where you have folks that do have training, are able to kind of take those first steps of understanding, what that, detective puzzle process is in science, and then being able to communicate that at least even locally within networks is powerful, right? So that you can develop those in a way, relationships of trust to understand that, hey, you know us from this great group that does work in our community around science, and oh, by the way, we can actually now start to address and talk about some of these issues and create forums for that. So I know, for example, Maria and Patrick in the Bay Area in the United States, through their labs, have been doing regular sessions with their community about COVID. So like COVID Q&A sessions that have been unfolding. And again, I mentioned for myself these different kind of live formats and ways to communicate outwards. And there's so many different ways you could do it, right? You can do it in written form, you can do it through social media, you can do it through lives, you can do it through webinars and so on. And, probably like an approach that is kind of all of the above is necessary, where you're using a variety of different mechanisms. But the core aspect, though, I think is about trust, which is like you can, through various mechanisms, communicate, but that you as an individual or you as a lab or an organization can start building trust so that people feel like, hey, I can go back and listen to, Thelma in Mexico or David in, Boston, and that there is like a, information there in a relationship that is developing over time. And, I think you get that in the written form as well. If you've got, kind of blog writers that are writing posts, or Andy Slavitt's a great example. I didn't know about Andy Slavitt before the pandemic, but I discovered him on Twitter, and now he's like one of my go-to sources because I trust him. Right, over time I've like developed a trust with him and his writing. And so I think that's something that for everybody that's participating in this call, just as a participant, and for those that may watch this video later, I think if you are part of a community lab or part of a grassroots science network, I think thinking about creative ways to engage with your community is really important. We've also got, great folks like Shinampas, which is out in the West Coast, Rolando and Corin in our community, that are working with agricultural workers, right, that have a very different sets of constraints. There's accessibility issues. There's a whole bunch of areas to just think about how do you communicate with certain types of communities. And one of the best ways to do it is with a trusted leader, a person that's in that area that already knows how to communicate with that community, has mechanisms, and there may be some existing channels. And then you can start leveraging those channels or maybe build new ones to then try to get more information out. So I think that's one way to think about it. But I do want to return to Hanu's question about kind of this larger, because of course there's so much you can communicate, and there's this larger idea that there's kind of, in a way, a mythology or like a language or like a set of narratives that we can tap into that could be used for a variety of purposes, I think is a really powerful one to think about. And I hadn't, until Hanu, you mentioned it, this idea that, I think we do live in a really unequal society with very asymmetric power dynamics. And that is very real, right? You can measure that across a variety of different types of metrics. And so the idea that there could be like a group of very powerful people that are kind of somehow leveraging what is very clearly a massive event that is influencing society, economics, political systems, et cetera. And so I don't know the answer, but Hanu, I think you've hit on something there, and something about how we can think about that common shared experience, I think, is really important. And I don't know. I feel like, just going back to this idea of trust, we increase our ability to be more effective in communicating whatever those stories are when we actually build up those relationships over time with our communities. So some additional thoughts there.
Really good. And for example, for you, Perrine, maybe you work with young people who are somehow related to science, somehow they're interested in science. So we as young people know that as a scientist, an hypothesis can be rejected or accepted. But if you're part of the society, it's like, oh, that doesn't work, that's failure. And that's a really big difference in a rejected hypothesis and a failure in science. So for those ones that are young people and want to start in this science communication world, in this moment, for example, many ones creating podcasts, maybe creating social media content, what do you think is critical for them to share or to know for example, for young people, as Emily was saying, she is not an expert in TikTok, but what if we start like spreading knowledge through these new platforms? What do you think it would be good to share to them, and how to start? And maybe what are the perspectives for example, the rest of this year that will not be like the years before for a science communicator? So how do you think we should start and develop if we want to become science communicators in this context?
Yeah, so what I especially like about science communication is that it isn't only for quote unquote science people. There is a niche for everyone, whether you're a science person or a liberal arts person or even both. And so I think when you're starting off with science communication, obviously I'm no expert in this, but from what I've seen in like, hosting our makeathons and just interacting with other high school students, people are interested when they're communicating a topic that's relevant to them, and that can pertain to anything. There are so many science topics and complex ideas that are relevant to young people. So when you're starting off, it's important to choose a medium that you're comfortable with, and you can use social media, art. I recently interacted with a science dancer, a science filmmaker. So there's so many mediums out there that is waiting for young people to explore. And I feel like that's the beauty of science communication. And actually, like during the pandemic, we usually hold in-person events, but this time we resorted to um, hosting like an online makeathon, and it was 30 days, and students came together and they made a science project of a medium of their choice and using a topic of their choice. And when we received the submissions, a lot of the topics were about really like, they weren't very complex. Some of them were about like animals, some of them were about COVID, someone made a podcast. So I feel like being a catalyst and just like giving people the resources to start, like giving people the mentorship, the resources, any like advice you would have is really good for people who are considering science communication. And I think it's also important to realize that right off the bat, like you won't be able to maybe like achieve the publicity you'd like, or like right off the bat, it will be hard to like maintain the projects, like gain traction. But as long as you're really passionate about what you're doing and really like put forth your best effort, I feel like science communication is really best for everyone, like regardless of their age, any like qualifications. It's really a welcoming field, and I feel like that's what I really like about it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think all of you have said like the intersection of communication is knowing exactly who you're talking to and what you want to say to them. So I think that's exactly how science communication should work. And our time is getting to an end, but I want just to ask, because I have this doubt to Emily. How do you see the future of this year communication? For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was all about what is a bacteria, what is a virus, what's the difference? Then what protect equipment you have to use if you want to go to the street. And now it's like, what are the treatments? What are the vaccines? Uh, and we are like changing subjects. What do you think it will happen in the next months of this year and in the beginning of the next one? What are like the trends in communication in this, like for example, this mass media that is medium?
Oh gosh, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I think the emphasis, I think there's still going to be a huge interest and emphasis on following the vaccines and treatments that are in development. I think in terms of what all of you can do in terms of like avoiding misinformation or avoiding like propagating misinformation and disinformation. I guess I wanted to bring in some points we talked about in this class I just taught, and that's try to avoid repeating or amplifying the piece of misinformation or disinformation. with, in journalism, especially lately in science journalism, we've seen this trend of debunking stories, which can be really effective, but there are also a lot of debunking stories that can actually kind of fuel the misinformation and disinformation. So I think when you go to debunk something, you have to be really careful of how you're doing it. And there's been a lot of research on false information showing that when you go to debunk something, you can't just say that this is wrong. When you debunk something, you have to replace the false information with what's true, because people are less likely to accept debunking when you just flat out, say you're wrong. And I think that comes from getting back to David and Hanu's points about trust and understanding why misinformation, disinformation is propagating. I mean, uncertainty breeds conspiracy theories, and most, if not all, conspiracy theories have a little kernel of truth. And I think, when you're in your social networks, both as an individual and as an organization and as a community, when you're communicating with people who are maybe sharing these conspiracy theories, I think you have to come from a place of sympathy and understanding about why they are believing that, and what need is that conspiracy theory or false information filling. And it's because people are afraid right now. Things are uncertain, and people want to kind of cling to something that seems, by their logic, plausible. So I think,
Yes.
Coming at it from that place of understanding and when you're engaging with people, don't flat out say you're lying or attacking them or coming off in a defensive way. I think, trying to ask questions like why do these people believe these things is going to be really important. And I hope, journalism and science communication moving forward will take these lessons that we are learning with debunking. I hope to see far fewer of these types of headlines that say, Trump says X, or this Trump administration person says Y. I think we need to stop putting claims like that in headlines, because most people don't read past a headline on social media and aren't going to get the full context of the story. And but also on the opposite end of that, I think it's really important to say, to not say people are lying. I think we need to be very careful and say this person made a false claim, or better yet, just put the correct information in the headline. So that's sort of my spiel.
Yeah, that's it. Not maybe be that aggressive of saying, no, you're wrong, shut up. It's okay, maybe, because after all, we are all rational humans. We believe things based on things. They may be a lie or may not be real, but we don't know. We really have a logical conscience of what we are thinking. And if someone comes to you and say, no, you're wrong, you're stupid, it's no, okay, that's aggressive, calm down, we can all talk and we can all understand, right? So, well, awesome. And we have 10 minutes left, so I will just maybe read the questions that we had to let people know what's happening. I said, if you can raise your hand, you can talk, but maybe we can just read questions to get faster to them. So, oh well, but before this, any final conclusion in a nutshell, in a tweet? Let's do that. Maybe in a tweet, all of you little panelists, tell us what do you think, what do you learn in just 20 seconds, starting by, I don't know, David, for example, a tweet.
Oh, that's just hard. I guess I just wanted to react really quickly to what Emily was saying about empathy, which I think is really, really important. And I think something I've seen as well is that I think is not healthy is sort of the larger cancel culture around oh, this person disagrees with the view. Let's unfollow me. Let's not talk about this anymore, which I think is really unhealthy. And it's something that, in my, sorry, Thelma, I'm not doing the tweet thing.
What tweet?
Okay, I can't think of one fast enough. Maybe just have
Well,
empathy for
example, Hanu, do you have a tweet
yeah, go
in your
for it.
head for the panel?
I'm just really echoing what David said.
Yeah.
Communication is empathy. I
Um,
think Emily also put it really well.
we should actually tweet that. Well, Emily, one tweet. Or
Oh, sorry, my internet went out for a second there. Let's see, a tweet. I think that as science communicators and as scientists, we should not be afraid to say what we don't know, and we should not be afraid to communicate uncertainty.
okay. Now, Perrine, what would you tweet after this?
I would say, science communication has so many different perspectives from like biotechnology, from Hanu, and, just like talking about the community and just journalism. So, yeah, science communication is very opening and welcoming, and especially during these times.
Awesome. And finally, David, do you have your tweet?
Oh, back to me already for the tweet. Sure. How about ultimately we do need science communication at scale, and that grassroots communities can play a critical role in building trust and sharing information with their communities.
Okay, fine, good conclusions. And one question here is, for example, many people that now than ever think that they should not trust media like TV because they say they are biased because of the media owner benefits, and what it's like better to follow, like Twitter videos, or how can we address this problem or of the bias? For example, I don't know who really wants to talk about this media owner bias. Who feels, who has something to say?
I guess I can take this one. I would say that like how should I address this? I know a lot of journalists, being a journalist myself, and most of us are good people. Most of us are just doing our jobs, and we are writing the kinds of stories that we want to be reading ourselves. So like the way that I approach a story is, what kind of information, like, am I curious about? Do I want to know? Does my family want to know? This idea of media bias, I think, is not as prevalent as people actually think it is, because most people, the vast majority of people who get into journalism do it because we want to hold people accountable. We want to tell good stories and tell the truth, and we want to inform people. And I think you have to. I know there's like a huge. I don't want to say bias against the media, but I know that a lot of people have their own critiques and
maybe perspective.
But yeah, I just like want to put it out there that like we're all just trying to do our jobs in like the best possible way. And as a science journalist, I fret all the time over like right before a story goes live, I'm like, oh my God, did I get everything right? Like I'm always fact checking with my sources. I'm record all my interviews. I go back to the recordings all the time. I go back to my notes all the time. I'm most journalists who cover science and who do it well, I think, are generally trustworthy people, and they just want to get the best information out there. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe. And there is another question. Is there any agreed upon journalistic standard that is there for reporting science or news, or is it something that needs to be created? What do you think? Do we really have to make like a standard journalistic review? That sounds a little like academia, like peer review. I think it's a good idea, but would you think it would be doable in this context?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. I mean, a lot
mean,
of science journalists.
Maybe a guideline for all scientists in the world,
Oh,
for all communicators.
Yeah. So science journalists, I mean, a lot of science journalists come from a science background themselves. So I think a lot of science journalists are probably more careful than the average journalist because they do have that science background and they approach writing in a really scientific way. I tend to, when I write a story, I tend to kind of like assemble my own not exactly a peer review committee, but like if I'm writing about a preprint, for instance, even before I decide to write about a preprint, I will ask at least 2 to 3 sources, 2 to 3 experts in the field, like, is this even worth writing about? So I think it's, I mean, most science journalism outlets and most journalistic outlets do have their own editorial standards. There isn't sort of like a general practice around science reporting, but if you are a science journalist, like you are trained to read a scientific study, you are trained on like how to communicate that information to the public. I think right now where we're seeing a lot of like missteps in communication are from outlets that aren't necessarily credible science journalism outlets, and from writers and reporters who weren't covering science before and have kind of just been put on the science beat now because the field of science journalism has really like contracted in recent years.
Well, yeah, and also for example, scientists, there are so many papers that are being developed, and we don't really know if we can trust them. There was Caroline Jones there, I think, saying that maybe we cannot really trust those papers as much as we trust papers that have been peer reviewed for years. So maybe just a scientist too, be like careful with what we are saying, and that we are saying to people that don't know how to find other sources. But well, sadly our time has finished. I really felt it was like 20 minutes talking to friends, but it was awesome. Really, thank you for being here, and thank you for all the ones who came, who gave their opinions. I saw in the chat they were all like, oh yeah, let's do this, let's do that, I have an initiative, let's start something. So that's kind of the vibe that we need in science communication, to review, to propose, to create new things, and to expand them, to create this network of people that we can trust. That it's, I think, the most important part of this science communication work. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank everyone who came here, everyone, Amanda, Henio, Perrine, David, for your time. And well, let's hope to work together to make better decisions, to create more communication, more content. And well, thank you for everything, and see you soon. Stay tuned, and we will soon be open for Bio Summit, so hope to see you all there. Thank you. Oh, David, you're mute.
Yeah, just a quick note that we'll be having another town hall in about 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So please stay tuned for more information there. And also that I believe the application for the BioSummit, BioSummit 4.0 is now open. So if you go to the BioSummit website, biosummit.org, you can apply. And again, we hope to have you join us. And just again, thank you so much to Thelma. Can we give a big round of applause and shout out to Thelma for doing such an awesome job? And again, just thank you all so much for being here. And Perrine, I'm so inspired that you are doing everything that you do. I feel so much hope for the future. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and Emily and Hunu as well. So thank you all so much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.